Steve Witkoff thinks Kirill Dmitriev is wonderful. Dmitriev back in the spring would show him around. Look, St. Petersburg is wonderful. Moscow is wonderful. So anytime Kirill Dmitriev says something, Witkoff goes and tells it to Trump. That's what happens here. Now, what is the reality versus what is said here? I mean, the reality here is, and I had kept saying, Russia had about 18% of Ukraine was occupied in 2022, at the end of 2022. It's now up to around about 19.5%. The Institute for the Study of War estimated somewhere about 0.9 of 1% of Ukrainian territory has been taken by Russia this year, at a cost this year in 2025 of 400,000 Russian casualties. Russia has gained 1 square kilometer. To get 1 square kilometer of Ukraine, Russia has lost 85 troops, right? Why is that important? Russia has taken less than 1% this year. They still have not taken Pokrovsk after 17 months. So this key town in Donetsk. And they say they're winning. At the rate of advance they're making, they might take the rest of Donetsk in the next 5 years if their economy can sustain this. So no, if I was to look at this both in terms of the limited gains on the battlefield, the state of the Russian economy, the Ukrainian counterattacks on Russia, and they just knocked out another major oil installation overnight. This winning-losing formula is ridiculous, and the media should not repeat it. The media should not repeat it. What they should say here is, we have in effect a conflict where there is very little movement on the ground. There is very little prospect of a breakthrough by either side. Both sides are suffering. So the question here is, can you get a ceasefire on the basis of the current lines? Any reasonable analysis would do that instead of falling into the winning versus losing trap.
Let's also continue to cover this Trump's interview with Politico. He expressed frustration with President Volodymyr Zelensky again, quote, "He's going to have to get on the ball and start accepting things, when you are losing." This is what President Trump said, Politico's reporter, and this is something different compared to what we heard 2 months ago after a meeting between President Zelensky and Trump in UN, when he told reporters that Ukraine could liberate all occupied territories. What is your take on this, and could we also hear another attitude from Trump in the upcoming weeks, when he can again repeat his statements that Ukraine can win this war in 1 or 2 months?
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because he's a bully. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this to you again. I just said that he doesn't know anything about Ukraine. So let's just say he's always been a bully when he's a businessman, which covers up the fact that he's not a very effective businessman. I could talk to you about the 6 bankruptcies. He's a bully as a presidential candidate, where he just gives people these insulting nicknames. He was a bully when he stalked Hillary Clinton around the debate stage in 2016. And he's a bully as president, or he tries to be a bully. So he insults President Zelensky. So go back to the start of this year, when he comes into office. I'm going to have a settlement within 24 hours. How's he going to get it? I'm going to talk to Russia, and I'm going to claim that President Zelensky is a dictator. He called him a dictator. Now, I mean, that's really rich, calling Zelensky a dictator when Donald Trump has been good friends with Vladimir Putin. But he calls Zelensky a dictator, and he says only 4% of Ukrainians support him, when the true figure at that point was that Zelensky had an approval rating of between 60 and 65%. Well, Zelensky didn't give way, to his credit. Well, during the summer, as you mentioned, and as we were talking about with Sofia there, when you get the adults in the room that tell him, look, Ukraine's not losing, it is Putin who is trying to humiliate you by continuing to attack civilians and refusing the ceasefire, then all of a sudden it became, oh, Zelensky is a good guy. He's defending his country, but I'm worried about Russia. Now what happens here is Witkoff and Kushner go to him in October and say, we've got a plan. We've got a plan with the Russians. We could get you that Nobel Peace Prize. And now Trump's like, oh, Zelensky's the barrier to it. not Putin. Zelensky's the barrier to it. So what does he do? He becomes the bully again. He's losing. Why doesn't he lose? Why doesn't he recognize? And that raises an interesting moment, because I always like to bring Europe back into the discussion, because it doesn't mean that you simply are powerless in front of a bully. Trump has another phrase, which is that Zelensky had, and you know this one in Ukraine. Every Ukrainian will know this. Zelensky has no cards, right? He has no cards versus the Russians. If you noticed on Monday, when the European leaders showed support in the meeting with Zelensky in London, this was the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron said, "We have the cards." And he mentioned specifically Russia's economy. Now, that's an important statement. It's an important statement because it shows that European leaders believe they still can put pressure on Russia. And secondly, it's a message back to Trump. Don't you think that we are powerless here? We may discuss this a little bit later. Beyond this is probably the biggest crisis in U.S.-European relations since 1945, because the Trump camp, Trump and those close advisors, do not believe in an alliance with Europe. So those European leaders are talking back to Trump and saying, okay, if you want to insult Zelensky, you want to insult Ukraine, you are also threatening us. Let's be very clear. You are threatening European security. And I think we're going to have a winter where it's going to be a question of standing up to Trump, the bully, not just on behalf of Ukrainian security, but European security. And you know me, I tend to be, if I look at the glass, I tend to look half full. That I think if you push Europe into that position, Europe will step up its support of Ukraine, precisely because they do not want to give way to Trump.
You just mentioned about this matter of cards. Who does have the cards right now? Europeans, Russians, Ukrainians. It's interesting that Russian oil exports in November were the lowest in recent years as Western sanctions and Ukrainian drones disrupted tankers and export terminals. According to Financial Times, analysts warn that if the pressure persists, Russia could face deeper structural constraints on its ability to sell cheap oil to global markets. Does it mean that Putin is losing his cards right now, begun to lose his most expensive, most valuable oil cards?
Yeah. Let me just say, first of all, in light with our previous answer, to Donald Trump and to all those great people that leave comments for us below our videos, how's that Russia's winning looking line working out for you, right? When you look at what you just mentioned, the specifics are that I think it's now the 3 Russian tankers have been hit in the last 2 weeks, and the one that was hit yesterday was critically damaged. So yeah, how's that working out for you? And then also the wider issue that you raised, and I'm glad you picked up that report. I just wrote about it about an hour ago, is that Russian oil exports are at their lowest point for November, going all the way back to 2016. There is another report this week that puts the estimate that Russia's oil exports are down 33% since January. I've seen other projections, which is with the continuing effect of the U.S. sanctions that were just adopted on Lukoil and Rosneft and on their customers, and with the Ukrainian attacks, we could be talking about Russian oil revenues being down 50% by December. And there's a fundamental here. I'm not saying that this means that Russia loses. I'm not saying this means that the economy completely collapses, but it constrains the Russian invasion. If you do not have 50% of your oil revenues, or even a third of your oil revenues, then it becomes an additional problem for your economy. And the Russian GDP is already stagnant. Inflation officially is around the 10% mark, but unofficially, according to the LSE, working with Ukrainian and European researchers, it's between 20 and 25%. Which means that Russia's real wages are not increasing. Russia is facing shortages in certain key manufacturing areas. The Russian financial system has got problems with bad loans. Russia's agricultural sector, food production in Russia declined this year in the past few months for the first time since 2009. So for the first time in 16 years, food output's down. Why is that? Partly because of problems in the agricultural sector with equipment, and partly because Russian consumers aren't eating as much food. So you tell me that this is a wartime economy which is winning. It just adds to this gap between projection and illusion, or projection and reality, because the Kremlin will continue to project that it's winning. It will continue to say, economically, we can handle this, no problem here. The special military operation continues. The fact here is that there are cracks that are appearing in terms of maintaining this. And I'll just refer to our great viewers to another fact which has just come out. In certain parts of Russia now, you're not seeing the bonuses and the military benefits being given either to troops or to their families of troops who have been slain. Those benefits are starting to be cut. And I'll refer you to another fact. The 2026 budget in Russia sharply decreases the percentage of money spent on social services. Now, you may say Russians are happy with that. They'll sacrifice social welfare programs for that. But fact is that it does make it more difficult for Russia to keep prosecuting the invasion, even if they step up the military share of the budget to, I think, 38%.
Another main topic of the week, I would say, it's also the new security strategy of the US. And we actually already heard some critics argue that this strategic signals that Washington is no longer firmly aligned with Europe or even Ukraine. What's your take on the new security strategy?
Okay. I've got a few things to say, but before I say that, don't just take it from me. The Danish government has said that the United States is now a threat to Europe. They're not even calling the U.S. It's not even the fact that it's not an ally. It's a threat to Europe. Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, when he met with the other leaders, when he met Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday, and then he repeated it on Tuesday, he said, look, we can't count on the Americans. We have to, as Europe, we have to be self-sufficient almost, economically, militarily, politically. Pope Leo, when he talked to President Zelensky on Tuesday, said this national security strategy threatens to break the alliance that we've had for almost 80 years. And Donald Trump's statements threaten that. So it's not just me. I mean, European leaders are looking at that document with a great deal of shock, even given the chaos and unpredictability of the Trump administration. So let's break this down for Ukraine and for Europe. You have that Trump faction which does not believe in an alliance with Europe. And that includes J.D. Vance, the vice president. It includes Steve Witkoff. It includes other political appointees, sometimes young political appointees who are very much hard right. Let's say, first of all, the U.S. has a far-right government now. And I know what far-right means, and you know what far-right means, and you know how important it is, that label. The U.S. has a far-right government right now. And I say that in part not only because they break the alliance with Europe, but of the reason they give for breaking it. The reason they give for breaking it is a conspiracy theory, which is called the Great Replacement. This has been whipped up by far-right activists, especially in the past 15 years when we've had to deal with the issue of rising migration and refugees and asylum seekers, including refugees from Ukraine. The Great Replacement theory says that white European countries are being overrun by non-white people, migrants, refugees. It was very much a fringe theory until the era of Donald Trump in the United States. It was a few people like his friend, the Fox TV personality Tucker Carlson, who used to push it. The document, the National Security Strategy, says that Europe is facing civilizational erasure. Your civilization will be erased because migrants are going to overwhelm you. That is racist. It is racist. It is, although the document doesn't mention religion, it's also probably Islamophobic, referring to Muslims. It is white nationalist. Now, when you have a government which has effectively now come out as far right, who does it look at as its allies? The document says the European Union must be broken up. And it gives all types of silly reasons. Supposedly, the European Union is this censor, for example, because it fines Elon Musk for inciting or allowing posts that incite violence and for not verifying accounts. So apparently the European Union is a greater threat to the United States than Russia is, because with Russia, you have a strategic realignment. So if the European Union should be broken up, how do you do it? You ally yourself, and this is what the document says, with far-right movements in Europe. It calls them European nationalists. Those far-right movements will include Alliance for Deutschland in Germany, whom you might remember in February when J.D. Vance insulted Europe, said that the U.S. no longer wanted to work with Europe, that he immediately met with the AfD leader, Elisa Weidel. So the Trump administration will work with AfD. They will work with Viktor Orban in Hungary, whom I know you all know very, very well, as an obstacle to the support of Ukraine. They will look to work with the far right in France, the National Rally. They will promote the far right UK Reform Party and try to get rid of the Labour government. And if an early draft of the document is right, they also think that there's vulnerabilities. They can work with far-right movements in Italy, Austria, and Poland. So this was a project of certain Trump advisors in the first Trump term, notably a man named Steve Bannon. This is now a project of a group of people around Donald Trump, which is, we don't believe in working with European democratic nations or with the EU. We work with movements because we think that their version of white nationalism should be supported, or because we think we can make money. That's the other incentive in the national security strategy, is to make money. And the reason why the national security strategy tilts towards Russia, because we can make money out of Russia. So what does all that mean? It's not just Ukrainian security that's at stake here. It is European security as well. And I'm just being very serious for a moment about this, because, I always worry about Trump because he's unpredictable, he's chaotic. But the thing about Trump is, because he's unpredictable and chaotic, he might change his mind and do something else. These are people who are not Donald Trump who are behind this strategy. And that means we have a serious problem, which is, even if Donald Trump was gone tomorrow, these white nationalists in the United States would be pursuing this very different foreign policy, which doesn't mean that we protect each other. It means they try to dominate us for the sake of profits or the sake of their very particular ideological vision.